Everyone, good evening, everyone. It's 6:30. Welcome to the Township of Monroe Planning Board meeting, July 27th, 2023. Before we get started, I'd like to let everyone know, please put your phones on silent or turn them off. Thank you very much. Our first order of business is to salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll read the Sunshine Law. In accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, it is hereby announced and shall be entered into the minutes of this meeting that adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the following: posted on the bulletin board of the office of the Township Clerk, posted on the bulletin boards within the municipal complex, printed in the Home News Tribune on December 30th, 2022, posted on the Monroe Township website, and sent to those individuals who have requested personal notice. Roll call, please.
Ms. Polidoro?
Here.
Mr. Rothman?
Here.
Mr. Riggs?
Here.
Ms. Brodsky? Here. Mr. McGowan? Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Oh. That Mr. Patel.
Anish? Yes.
I'll call you Mayor. Ms. Qureshi? Councilman Van Zura?
Here.
Mayor's Representative, Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Chairman Gaffrey?
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Mr. Patel, Mayor's Representative, to the board. Welcome.
Welcome.
Our next item up are the minutes. May 25th, 2023 minutes of the Planning Board meeting. You've all had a chance to review that in your packet. Does anyone have any comments? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to accept.
Motion to approve the minutes, please.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Polidoro?
Yes.
Mr. Rothman?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Ms. Brodsky? Yes. Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Councilman Van Zura?
Yes.
Mayor's Representative, Mr. Patel?
Abstain.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have one application tonight, PB 1255-23, Primera Real Estate Holdings, LLC. Request for a minor site plan, represented by Stephen Hambro. Thank you. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair.
Before you proceed, I'll acknowledge receipt of the mailings, the application of publication, accepting on behalf of the board. If there's any irregularities, I'll come back to the board, but I assume that it's sufficient.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I do have some additional green cards if you want those. I'm happy to provide them to you. I have a scan.
Be done at the end of the meeting.
Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. That's usually one of the first questions I ask is whether the board has jurisdiction and.
Is that microphone on?
Yeah, can you have the mic there?
Hello? Is that working?
It's interesting.
Is that working? No?
You have to pull it closer, it was going.
Is that better? No?
Give it a go. Hold it until the light green comes on. If not, we can maybe unplug.
It's a mute, but.
Yeah, hold that button until the light goes in.
But, yeah. Okay. Is that better? How about now?
Something's not that.
It's
The
green.
desk mics are working because it's being picked up through,
You're picking it up?
yeah. So just hold it closer. Hold the desk mic closer.
Okay. Testing?
Better.
That works? Okay. All right.
It's like it has to almost be.
Thank you. I apologize. Stephen Hambro. Last name is spelled Hambro. With the firm Hambro and Mitchell. We're in South Brunswick. That's where our office is located. And we are here on behalf of Primera Real Estate Holdings, LLC, the owner of the property and the applicant. It is for buildings E1 and E2 within the Matrix Corporate Campus Condominium Office Park, which is located at 259 Prospect Plains Road, or off of 259 Prospect Plains Road, in the Matrix Corporate Campus, which is a fairly large, I think the whole thing's about 80 or some odd acres. And Primera owns a 20 plus thousand square foot building, which is the E1 building. And then there was an annex, which is the E2 building. It's about 4,700 square feet. But I'll have our architect, who is here tonight, testify regarding that. So thank you, Mr. Convery, for reviewing the notices and confirming that the board does have jurisdiction based upon those notices, pending any further review that you might do regarding.
We acknowledge receipt.
Okay, thank you. So Primera purchased the property.
Steve,
Is this still not working?
I'm having a problem hearing you. Can you just hold it closer?
How about now?
Can you hear now?
How about now? I think she's saying it's difficult. Oh, that's much better. How about this? Is that better? Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. So Primera is has a company that is that has a laboratory in the E1 building at the present time, and in that laboratory they do some testing for the pharmaceutical industry in terms of quality and whatever contract testing is required. They use reagents. They're scientists. So what they would like to do, what we've submitted an application for, it's technically a minor site plan approval, but what they would like to do is the E2 building, which consists of about 4,700 square feet and is currently not occupied. They wanted to convert that to be part of the laboratory, which is in the E1 building. Wasn't sure whether she was saying she couldn't hear. Somebody was speaking behind me. Okay. So really the primary consideration here is to renovate the E2 building to make it available for use as laboratory, additional space for them to put their equipment, and that is what the intent of this application is all about. There are some minor changes to the building, such as putting in some windows and some HVAC units so that it can be occupied. There was a plan to add an ADA parking space in front of the E2 building, this building that's being renovated. But in discussion, once we received the board's reports and some comments, we have decided that we would withdraw that aspect of the application to add that additional parking space because that created a variance. So we want to alleviate that variance and not come forward with that variance. So that would be one further consideration that we would. Is it okay? More?
You gotta move that other mic away a little bit.
Just to get rid of the feedback.
Okay, thank you. Does that work better? Okay. So that is what this application is about. There's no changes really being proposed to the E1 building. Right now, it's being used, I think the numbers, I'll have our architect speak to that, about 17 or 18,000 square feet. It's being used as laboratory at the present time, laboratory and offices for laboratory at the present time, with about 2,500, 2,800 square feet used for, 2,900 square feet used for storage. That is going to continue. The E2 building will have additional equipment. so that they can do similar type of testing and work that they're doing presently in the E1 building. They do not intend to have any employees stationed permanently there. They will be stationed at the E1 building, walk over to the E2 building. Right now, you'll hear testimony from from a representative from Primera. There's approximately 60 employees. They have another location in Princeton. So they do come back and forth, but at peak times, approximately 60 employees, which I think is a little bit more than what we had indicated when we were at the TRC. We looked at those numbers and made that assessment. So I'm going to call, we have 3 witnesses this evening. We have our architect who prepared the plans, and we have a representative from Primera. The architect is Ben. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name. I call him Ben Chitikaria, something similar. I think I got that. And then we have Steve Grossman, who is the representative. He's the senior vice president of operations for Primera. And we have a planner, Frank Anticel, who are going to testify as soon as I stop talking. So with that, unless there's some other questions before we begin, I'll bring our first witness, which will be Mr. Ben Chitikaria.
Hello, hello. Can you hear me? Yep. All right, here, let's use this. Turn that. You turn the volume up on that, Mr. Hambro. So. Oh, use the one to stand in front of you.
He may want to
He can
get
use that
out.
one. He can take that over there.
Ben, I hope I didn't.
Swear I'm in. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Just spell your last name for us.
CATARINICCHIA.
And how do you pronounce that?
Katarinikias.
I butchered it. I apologize. So
Yes. I'm a graduate of the University of Arizona. I am licensed in 14 states throughout the country. Done work from here to California. I have testified between amongst numerous states. I'm NCARB certified also.
Steve.
Sandra, could you remove your hand, like finger off the mic?
There you go.
okay, is as an architect you're licensed?
Yes.
Okay, and you're licensed in New Jersey,
Yes, I am.
and you've appeared in front of boards such as this one here in Middlesex County.
Yes.
Have you ever appeared before this particular board?
I may have I'm not sure off of my memory if I have.
Okay. So I would present Mr. Ben, I'm going to call him, as an expert in the field of architecture,
Yes,
being a
thank
licensed
you. We
architect.
accept your credentials. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Ben, if you would please describe to the board what brought us here to this point and what the plan is for buildings E1 and E2.
We were approached by Primera, my firm, to look at building E2. E2 is an existing standing Butler building, has water service to it already in the form of a sprinkler system, had electrical ran to it already. Of course, not the power that we need to do this. So they approached us to see the validity of actually turning this into some lab space. So we did some preliminary plans for them. And it works well. We've worked on several buildings like these Butler buildings and have turned them into offices / labs / different types of uses. We plan on doing I'd say probably 95% of what we're doing to it is all on the inside. We're doing very little to the outside of the building. Aside from really on the outside, the only thing we're doing is punching in, I believe, 4 windows on the side, or no, I'm sorry, 3 windows And we're taking out the garage door and putting a glass storefront in for entry into the building. Other than the standard utilities and interior partitions, the building itself is really not going to change much. It's going to look exactly like it does now. I mean, except for the interiors, they're going to be heavily modified.
Can you describe to the board the E2 building and what, how big is it?
It's approximately 4,800 square feet. The building itself, I got the exact on the drawings of the exact square footage of it. And we've divided it up. It has actually if you're looking at the plan on the right side of the plan is mainly a computer room that houses most of their analytical equipment, which I'll let Steve get into exactly what it does. And on the other side, we have small molecule and large molecule lab spaces, along with all the intricacies that come with doing a lab space.
And this is similar to the operation that's presently occurring in the E1 building?
Yes. Yeah. It's just an expansion upon what they do in E1.
Okay. And do you have the breakout in terms of what the usage is in the existing E1 building, storage versus lab?
I have it on the plans, and it was pretty close to what you had said in the beginning for the square footages of what was used and what wasn't. We have in the E1 building right now, we have some office space, storage space, and primarily most of it is lab space.
Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about the ADA space in the front. We're going to remove that from the plan because we don't want to implicate a variance. That's correct?
That's correct. We initially put that there because we went back and forth with zoning and planning quite a bit on this, and it was suggested to us that we may want to put it there. But upon further investigation, we found out that we do have ample parking for what's there. So there's no really reason to put an extra parking space in. Plus, it adds to better flow for them going back and forth, not having to walk around the car. So it actually is better if it's not there for them taking equipment and stuff back and forth from one building to the other.
Okay. And you prepared the plans that were submitted to the board?
Correct.
And those were based on what?
Those were based on former site plans that we had and site plans that were provided to us by the client.
All right. And so also in terms of, so if you could describe the layout for the existing, where the parking is located. Said you can actually walk with that?
No, cordless mic.
Cordless.
Just hold the button until the microphone's on.
So that's.
No. Okay. Is it blinking or is it steady?
Oh, now it's.
Okay, we're doing more. This is K1. Okay.
So if you look here, basically we did a breakdown of E1 and E2.
Hey, Ben, if you could go on the other side, you're blocking the view.
I don't want to block the view from that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if you notice in the beginning building areas, we did a breakdown of building E1 and E2. E2 is actually 4,869 square feet. Existing, no change.
And where is E2 on the plan?
E2 is located right here, adjacent to E1.
Okay.
Small little walkway that goes across.
Okay.
Can I just ask, did you turn the mic off? Did you hit the button and it turned off?
Hello.
There you go. Thank you.
Yeah. You know what, Ben? Go back to E1 again, the first page. If you could describe as well where the parking is located.
Yes, based on the documentation we received, this is E1 building, this is E2 building, and they have a bank of parking that's dedicated to them in this area right over here. And the parking spaces based on calculations Building area. So basically, the calculations that we did, they have ample parking. They're over in their parking that they need required for this because
Okay.
they also have parking spaces in the back of the building.
So just for the board's clarification, public clarification, my understanding is that there's 103 spaces that are set aside there in the E1 building.
That's correct.
Exclusively for the use by Primera.
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying there's an additional 12 spaces that are behind the E1 building?
That's correct. Yeah.
And show the board where those are as well.
Those are striped in back of the building back here.
Okay. And just going back to the parking lot, there's a solid line that you see, and there's also you're showing as well building F, which is next to the parking lot. Can you just point to building F? Right. And there's parking in that same parking area, but it's designated, there's a solid line delineating the different parking areas for building F and for building E1 and E2, correct?
That's correct. And what it does is basically they delineate the parking this way, I'm assuming, because their handicap stalls are for this building here, where our handicap stalls are here, which cross the street and go into their building.
Okay. All right. Now you can go on to what you were going to present next, which is the next page. A2. Ben, do you have a pen? You want to just mark that A1 and A2?
Okay, this is actually a floor plan of the existing Primera building E1. We did this as a reference just so you could see what parts of it are lab and what parts of it are office and which parts of it are storage and delivery. This is our proposed layout for the building E2.
So
Okay,
just for the record, you're talking about the top being E1 and the bottom being E2,
that's correct. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So in E2, basically, they have an LCMS inner lab, which I'm going to let Steve explain to you how exactly all the equipment works. We have LCMS outer lab and LCMS outer lab, which are control rooms for this. Basically, we have a balancing room, a small molecule room, a large molecule room, and a Regents prep center, Regents prep room. We have electrical room, and then we have basically our utilities. We have 2 restrooms that we put in just for ease of the scientists not having to walk back and forth, and some storage rooms and some utility closets. It's a very simple layout. We've addressed everything with respect to the labs. We have eye wash sinks. We have everything for safety that's in there for a standard lab. And since it is a Butler building, we're going to burr out all the exterior walls with new walls on the inside so we can get the insulation that we need because it is a Butler building. And all the utilities that we're putting in the building, nothing's going on the roof because it's a Butler building. They're not made for that. So everything is going to be ground mounted back of the building. But the only thing we really have are 4 basically HVAC units and a makeup air unit we're going to have back there.
Okay. There was, in terms of the HVAC units, there were some comments in Ms. Apte's report, the board's planners report, about the provision of screening around those, I believe landscape screening.
Mhm.
Is that something we would be able to provide?
Absolutely. Yes. We could either do landscape screening, or we could do some type of fence around it so that they're blocked. The units that they are going to put in here are basically residential units. So they're not high volume. They don't create large noise. They're just like a standard large scale residential unit.
Okay. In terms of some of the other comments, if you would go back, I think, to the first page. A1. And to the rear of the building, so I'm looking at Ms. Apte's report. She has some comments about tractor trailer spaces. Could you identify exactly what we're talking about where I think you have it as semi-parking, is that?
We located it here because it was brought up as a report. They don't really get semis delivering stuff here. Most of their deliveries come in box trucks or UPS or FedEx box trucks. They really don't get semi delivery. Yeah, they don't get the big trucks here. The big trucks, the only time they'll get big trucks is if it's a delivery of equipment, but that's maybe once every 2 years they're going to get new equipment in. And I'll let Steve address that, but most of it that we need back here is just box trucks.
Okay. There were a couple other comments about the location of the parking spaces. Is there also a loading dock in the rear, do you know?
Yes, there is.
And can you identify where that would be located?
The loading dock, I believe, is over in this section right here.
Okay, all right. There were some comments also about the proximity of the parking spaces to the building. Those are existing spaces?
Those spaces were on the original site plan that we received from Matrix. So,
Okay, all right,
so they were designated when they had the space. They were designated as parking spaces.
right. And to your knowledge, are those spaces, you've gone out to the site and visited the site?
Yeah. I mean, they're not used, but they're there. I mean, they can be restriped if need be.
Okay. All right. I don't have anything further, I don't believe. What about lighting? There was a question also about lighting.
Exterior of the building is only receiving 3 lights. Yes, we are going to put over top of the entry, which is, maybe I'll go to A2 here. We are going to put 1 canopy light that's here, that's going to shine down on the door specifically. We were going to put 1 light in the back for servicing of the HVAC systems.
Excuse me. Let's let the testimony finish, please. So you'll have a chance to ask questions
Yes.
later.
Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
we were going to put 1 wall pack in the back, and we were going to put 1 wall pack near this emergency exit door on the back side. That was it. That was the only lights that we had proposed for it. And we do understand, because we got residences behind us, we can do some baffling of the light, so it goes down to the units only.
Okay. Do you have any specifications that you could provide as well to the
Yeah, it's
board?
actually on the drawing, the specifications for the light. There's one here. The wall pack light didn't print, but I can provide the specifications on it. Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't believe I have any further questions for you. Oh, in terms of the parking, what's the calculation that we've used for parking? And I think we have been working off of 50 employees, but
Yes.
actually we have, we're amending that it's probably going to be about 60.
Yes.
Could even be a little bit more, but the capacity under the ordinance is,
Yes. Total required spaces with what we were originally working on was 60 spaces. We have 116 spaces.
well, 115 because we're not going to do,
115 spaces.
not doing the ADA. But that calculation was 1 for every 2 employees.
That's correct.
Hire of 1 for every 2 employees, or based on the square footage of the
That's correct.
laboratory use and the storage and
Yes,
office
it was the
use.
higher of the 2.
Right. So in either case, we're well in excess of the number of parking spaces.
Yes, we are.
Even with the additional, let's say, 10 employees.
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any further questions for Mr. Ben.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to have our board planner, if you have any questions, any comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Ben, thank you for answering most of the questions. Just a couple of clarifications. The loading area that you said is already existing. Would you confirm for us, not right now, but there are at least 2 loading spaces and their dimensions? Would you
Absolutely.
be able to provide that?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So you said 2?
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're looking for is 1 for staging of a truck and 1 for unloading, correct? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's like 12 by 60. I think there's enough room, right?
Yeah, there
It
is.
looks
There's
like,
enough room because it's right here and it's a large area that's back of the building over here.
Yeah.
I can give you
It's-
the dimensions on it.
Thank you. So it's like a 25,000 square foot operation. You would need 1 for first 10,000, and then every 20,000 you need to add 1 more. So it comes up to 1.5. Might as well
Okay.
do 2.
We'll work with you on it.
Could you talk a little bit about the architectural, elevation changes to the E2 building? The proposed, I'm assuming it's a metal building, is it?
Yeah, it's a standard metal brown building. It's a standard Butler building, and I don't know if everybody knows what a Butler building is. It's a standard A-frame with steel and structure, and just has metal panels on it. They're primarily made for storage, but you can convert them into usable space. The outside of the building, we pretty much aren't touching much of the outside of the building, aside from, as I said, the windows on the side and the door in the back. And taking out the garage, there's I want to say a 20-foot garage door right now in front. We're taking that out and just changing that over to storefront with the little canopy coming out that covers it from the rain.
Would the building look, like you said, the metal panels, is there any coloring or painting proposed? And if that is, would this comply with all the rest of the existing buildings around it?
Yes, we don't have anything for painting at this point on it.
Okay.
But that's up to the client if they want to paint it or not. But at this point, no, we're not going to paint it. We're just going to fix it up. The building, in my opinion, is going to look 100 times better than what it does right now. Because right now it's just a shed.
Okay. And you're confident, like in terms of heating and cooling of that building, because it's going to be used by employees?
Because what we're going to do is we're going to actually fur new walls inside of the metal walls.
Okay.
And then we're introducing all of our insulation into those walls. So it's actually going to it's a better insulation system than standard because it creates a cavity where air transfer can't go through. So.
Okay. The next question I have, I think the testimony was that there won't be any more ADA space opposite the E2 building proposed. I would let board engineer, kind of weigh in on that in terms of ADA requirements. But just for my understanding, does the building code require a certain distance be maintained from the building when it's an ADA space?
Not necessarily. I mean, but because we do have them dedicated to this space, and technically, they can park in the handicap parking stalls that are here, come across. Now, need be, if we need, we can put a sidewalk coming down so that they can enter into that. Just have a flat sidewalk going down. I think that would be less intrusive than trying to put an ADA space. My only concern with the ADA space is the use of and the safety of the employees. You have a door in E1, which is here, and a door that's going in the E2 here. You're going to have employees crossing back and forth. And my concern is a car coming in there trying to park and then employees walking across with something. So it's just a safety thing. I think that we're better off leaving the ADA spaces on the other side.
I would like to see, what you recommended, at least a sidewalk going, because that does seem quite a distance for an ADA, person to go from that parking space to. I know there are crosswalks to the building E1, but how is that person getting to building E2? I think would be recommended. The central area is still remaining paved, right? That's not changing. Okay. The question on refuse and recycling, Mr. Hambro, I'm assuming the next witness would answer that?
No, you got me on that one.
Okay.
I apologize. Do you have an area identified or I don't know if you have it identified yet. I think there was something that is somewhat in disrepair further in the back, but that's pretty far away from the building itself for refuse and refuse pickup, trash pickup. Is there an area that you would suggest that could be utilized and then screened as well for putting like dumpsters, for instance?
Yeah, my suggestion, on the back of the building right now, there is a dumpster enclosure that's overgrown, falling apart, as dumpster enclosures go. What I would suggest we do is we'll provide a dumpster enclosure over in this area between the two buildings that will house both their dumpsters, that will be able to be serviced by both buildings. It'll be more convenient if we moved it over in between where the two buildings are.
Okay. There are certain regulations in the ordinance with the placement of, there have to be like a 8-foot wall around it. It has to be in a lockable gate, as well as I think there has to be a 5-foot landscaping around it. So we'll have to make sure all that is shown.
I could coordinate the location with you and what landscaping we're going to put around it.
Okay. I believe you did provide us in your package, about the timings of waste pickup and everything. I would recommend, I don't know if Mr. Ben can or your next witness can talk about, because it's going to be chemical storage and disposal, if they can talk a little bit about how that will be managed and how that will be disposed. I would recommend.
Certainly.
Also, I'm assuming the performance standards answer would be taken
Yes.
care of
Yes.
with the next witness. The one last question I have is, we do have the zoning table just relating to the E1, E2. And I understand that why that was done because of the condo nature of this site. However, in the zoning ordinance, you have to consider the whole site in terms of setbacks. So if you could provide that, I'm assuming they're all meeting the setback requirements, but if that can be provided to our offices.
Are you speaking about just this sublot or the entire
The
83?
entire, because it's still considered one lot. The
Okay.
condos are,
Right.
it's more like a real estate term
Right,
rather
right.
than a zoning term.
Right. I know there have been several other applications over the years, so we'll track down.
Perfect.
I know there were a couple of resolutions I provided. I'll track down the engineers
Okay.
and see if I can provide. I did provide earlier a survey of the condo plan, but I don't know if it has sufficient details
Yeah.
for you to see.
Yeah, that's why I have the sub parcel, if you want to call it, but the sub condo for E1, E2, I just don't have.
We do have, and I could provide to you,
Yeah.
a survey of the entire site. So I could provide that to you.
That'll be great.
And this has every setback on it for every building. So
Yeah, that's what we would.
Okay, that was not provided?
I did provide it. In the
Okay.
last package I sent in, I don't know.
Okay.
Does it have a table?
I don't think it has a table, but it has all the information on it for the entire matrix site.
So you're requesting that we provide a table with those, along with that, put that on that
Yeah.
page?
I've already set it up on my
Right.
review, so it shouldn't be, you just have to
Okay,
measure it and put it
Yes,
on.
we could do that.
So, thank you.
great.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. Our board engineer, Mr. Razumowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Handicap parking. So you're eliminating what you had proposed, the one handicap parking in front of E2. Is the E2 building standing on its own? So is this part of your operation where people are going to spend the whole day in building E2? How does this operation work, and how are people getting to the E2 building?
Okay, we have a next witness will really address that from a testimonial standpoint, but it's my understanding that they are going to be basically housed still in the E1 building, and some of the equipment will be in the E2 building. They will go from the E2 building. There's also a break room and bathrooms in there, but they're going to continue to be housed in the E1 building.
So
There's no office space in the E2 building.
So it was suggested by your professionals to run a sidewalk from the parking lot to the E2 building. So is that now the people are going to go directly to the E2 building as it was stated, or are they going to go through E1 to get to E2? How is this going to
The
operate?
employees are going to be in E1, and they're going to walk through E1 to the exit door. Is an exit door close to the E2 building?
Yes.
The side of the E2 building?
Here.
And walk across that short area. It's presently paved. And that's the area where they were proposing to put the ADA space right in front of the E2 building. But that's off the table at this point.
So let me go back. How many parking spaces do you have in that E2 lot? I'm sorry?
115 parking spaces.
Okay. And how many handicap? ADA?
2.
So right off the bat, you're not ADA compliant with handicap parking spaces. So where are these parking spaces going to go?
Well,
If
we
you're
have
not gonna
extra-
provide
we have-
one.
We have ample parking spaces. We could add ADA spaces to where they are right now.
Okay, so you're agreeing to provide the required number of ADA spaces.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, so the next question is, where are they going to go?
They'll be banked directly where the handicap spaces are right now.
So you'll restripe that and provide the proper signage. Okay, so let me go back to the parking area in front of E2. You said there's parking behind the building of E1, which there is, and I've been out there and I've seen the cars parked there. Can you eliminate the driveway? Because I think your argument was you can't provide ADA in front of the E2 building because the employees are going to be walking back and forth from E1 to E2. But it's still a driveway access for the parking behind E1.
It's not, actually, you can't get through that area, if I recall correctly.
Well,
Shows driveway on your plan, and frankly, I drove it.
there's also an entrance in front of the E1 building.
Yes.
Before you get to the E1 building, there's this drive that goes to the rear as well.
So back to your argument for eliminating that ADA spot, can we close off that driveway
Which one?
between E1 and E2?
I don't know if you'd want to do that for fire. I mean, if a fire truck's got to get in there, they're going to have to get around the building. You're limiting a fire truck getting around the building. So, I mean, I wouldn't eliminate it for means of safety.
So we'll ask that you, that's one of the comments in my review letter, that you need to reach out to the fire district and get their review and approval of your plan.
Okay.
You mentioned restriping all the parking spaces. You're agreeing to restripe all your parking spots in the rear and across the street?
Most of them are striped across the street. I think what we're going to do is restripe the handicap, the ones along the front, to comply with the ADA
Okay.
requirements. We can certainly do that.
And the ones behind the building will be restriped?
We can
I think
restripe the
that's
ones.
what was mentioned.
Yes.
Okay, you have some lighting you proposed on the, around the building. You have a couple, you said those were wall packs on the back of the building and the side. My concern is, facing the residents. It is a wooded area, but, in the wintertime, the leaves are not on the trees. I'd look to add some evergreen buffering around that, especially around the equipment back there, the HVAC equipment.
Yeah, I think we already agreed to do the buffering around the equipment, so we could do it with evergreens. That way it's blocked. Also, we can also put in some baffles on the lighting in the back of the building to make sure it shines down and not towards the back.
When you say the back of the building, you're talking about,
Well, what's the side of the building?
Well, frankly, it'd be both, probably
Yeah.
both. Yeah, both wall packs.
All right.
That's all I have for right now. I'll reserve until we hear the other testimony.
thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments? Mr. Riggs?
You use the term laboratory. What are the components that are tested in the laboratory or worked with in the laboratory? And what residue is created?
I will let,
That will be our next witness.
Is that okay? That's okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Soren?
Madam Chair, thank you. A quick comment. I'm going to actually have to put my water utility hat on at this particular point. Back in September of 2022, we forwarded a letter from our utility engineer to Mr. Aquino, because in August of 2022, we received a email from Mr. Aquino saying that they now want to provide water service to building E2. That application has never been filed with the water department, and it's absolutely critical that that application be filed, that we absolutely take a look at what the necessary requirements are, especially from a fire flow standpoint, as well as obviously servicing restrooms and any potable water requirements. You're going to need a meter. You're going to need a RPZ, which is a reduced pressure zone backflow preventer. There's a number of requirements, but unfortunately we haven't had the opportunity to review the plans. So my recommendation to this board, if they move forward with approval, is that under no circumstances can resolution compliance be granted until a completed and final application for water be approved, as well as the water service be installed. Okay.
I spoke to the engineer regarding that. And he did say that he would be filing the application for the water service.
Okay, that's critical.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Any other questions? concerns? Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Can bring up your next witness or
You want to say,
testimony.
I don't know how your usual procedure is in terms of, would you like me to call my next witness or? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Very good.
And then we'll question,
Okay.
follow up with questions after each one.
Thank you.
Yep.
Stephen Grossman?
Mr. Grossman, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth.
I do.
State your full name, spell your last name, please.
Steve Grossman, Grossman. Hello? Hello?
Just talking to the one on.
Make sure you can hear me.
Okay. Steve, can you provide us with what your position is with Primera?
So I am the Vice President of Operations. I've been in this position for a year. I've been with Primera for a total of 6 years. I was there for 2 years, left for a couple years, and been there for about 4 years now since I came back.
Okay. And are you located, is your office where you work located at this site?
Yes.
Okay. And can you please describe for the board what the operations are? What is it that Primera does? And, what kind of, we talked about testing, but if you could describe more specifically and fully than I was able to.
Sure. So we are an analytical testing laboratory. So we perform testing for the pharmaceutical industry. Other pharmaceutical companies will come to us to perform analytical testing on their drugs or develop a method to test their drugs, because there could be a number of reasons why. They don't have the laboratories, they don't have the people, they don't have the equipment. So they'll contract us to do work for them.
Okay. And so what types of materials and what types of equipment, I mean, maybe you could go through the plan and describe to the board what it is that currently exists in the building and what's proposed for the new building.
Right. So there are various types of equipment that you need to test products. For this particular building, it's LCMS, liquid chromatography mass spec. So that's, the testing is used for identity, looking for identity of the product, purity of the product. We test, it could be pills, it could be powder, it could be biological material. So it needs to be separated. So that type of equipment. So currently we're doing this work in E1, but we want to move some of the equipment into E2 to free up some space.
Okay. So, and I don't know whether we've quite yet answered the question. So the process is there are chemicals and materials that are used as part of the testing?
Correct. So there are solvents, organic solvents, water, salts, acids, base. So that's the type of, generally a type of material that's used.
And how much of that is stored on site at any point in time, any one point in time?
So basically it's run through on a consistent basis. So we'll order material, but then it gets used. And when we get down lower, we, order more. So it changes as we continue to test.
Okay. And so these deliveries occur by what kind of service? What kind of delivery service?
So we have, as far as deliveries go, we have different trucks that come, mostly, UPS and FedEx. Then there may be another company, a worldwide courier that provides shipment for us. I know it was talked about, equipment. As far as equipment goes, maybe twice a year we'll get some equipment. So that's where you may have the longer trucks, but that's only, 2 to 3 times a year.
Right. So when you get these deliveries, how big of a shipment do you get when you're ordering, for instance, chemicals? Like,
Chemicals, they're, as an example, there may be, a box of 4-liter bottles in a box, and maybe we'll get 10 boxes or so.
right. And then where are these stored?
So we have, depending upon the type of material, like flammable material will be stored in flammable cabinets. So we have specific cabinets for that type of material.
And those are typically used in a laboratory,
Yes,
the type.
very typical laboratory
Okay.
storage.
All right. And what kind of safety precautions are there with respect to the use of these materials during the course of testing and handling them?
So we have SOPs that basically direct all our activities within the laboratory, and everyone gets trained on the SOPs, and they have to be followed. Yes, sorry.
SOP is-
Yeah,
Standard
I was just gonna
operating
say, define
procedure. Sorry,
SOP.
I'm used to my lingo.
I'm from pharmaceuticals, that's why.
All right, good. And, so that are followed of all
So-
procedures.
And that's all in accordance with what oversight regulatory standards? Is that OSHA?
So
Is
we
that-
have OSHA, FDA, EPA.
Okay, and you're in compliance with
Yes.
all EPA, FDA, and OSHA standards.
Right. As far as I know, the question is about waste, NJDEP. So we follow, their requirements for handling of chemicals and waste.
So that was going to be my next question in terms of once these various reagents or chemicals are used, what happens to them? I guess they're presumed to be waste, correct?
Right.
And what do you do with them? How do you store them, and how do you dispose of them?
So the solvent waste, basically, we have a secure-all shed in the back. So that's basically a storage that's been designed specifically for outside storage that meets OSHA and EPA regulations.
And you do understand that there was a comment in Ms. Apte's report as well, which I think the performance standard was that it's not to be stored outside, correct? We would submit that the Securezol shed is a state-of-the-art. Maybe you can talk about it. I don't want to testify about it. So you
Right.
can talk about that.
It's specifically designed for outside and storage of this type of material. Now, hazardous waste, we have 4.5 cubic boxes that we put the hazardous waste in.
Is that hazardous or is that biologic?
It's biologic waste.
Okay.
And that gets picked up once a month. But then that's in the laboratory.
So you brought some specifications for the Securezol shed?
Kind of a description of it from their website that describes it.
And you have one currently right now?
Yes.
We have some photographs. Maybe we can mark these if is that photograph an accurate depiction of the Securezol shed that you're speaking of where you store waste materials?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, excuse me, has this been provided to our professionals?
It has not. It has not. Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. But we are providing it now.
Thank you.
Okay. And we have several copies of this. And the second photograph, if you could identify that as well.
Yes, that's on the posting on the shed itself.
That's the inside door.
Correct.
Okay. If we could mark these for identification.
The A3 and A4. Probably right.
A3.
If I may request, since they have several copies, it'd be good for us to pass it along.
Is that okay?
Yes, sure.
May I start over?
Please just make sure that our board professionals get a copy.
Absolutely.
Chair, if I could just ask a quick question. Is the shed an existing shed or is this proposed?
It's existing.
So you have an existing shed out there. Where is it located?
It's right behind in the back of E1.
In back of the building?
Correct. E1.
Thank you.
You.
Wolf Festival. Thank you.
Please continue.
Thank you. So in terms of your testimony, these are industry standard type of sheds that are, can you describe what they are and how they're utilized?
Yeah, so it's a metal shed. Again, let's see, I look 12 gauge steel, all welded 12 gauge steel. Inner wall is constructed of 20 gauge steel. And there's a 3-foot airspace throughout. And
that's locked. How does that work?
so
Is it
it's closed,
alarmed?
Right, it's locked. No, it's not alarmed.
Okay. All right. So what happens so what do you keep in there?
That's where the solvent waste would be.
Okay. And they're contained in what? In other?
There are 55-gallon drums that are in here. So the waste goes in the 55-gallon drums.
And then what happens to it? Is it
Then it gets
recycled, taken
disposed.
away?
Right. Then they get taken away. They get picked up and taken away.
And that's on a regular basis? Who does the retrieval and disposal?
So that's waste management.
Waste management.
Yep.
And they dispose of it in accordance with EPA standards?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else you want to tell us about the secure all shed?
No, I think we're
okay. So I think we've addressed. So did you address where the biologic waste is stored?
Yes. So again, that goes into cardboard boxes, 4.5 cubic boxes that are labeled as, the hazardous waste, the biologic waste, and then they get picked up once a month.
Once a month, and that's
it's basically in the laboratory.
That's maintained in a laboratory in a
Correct.
secured area.
Yes.
And locked.
Our laboratory is locked and secured.
Okay. And what company retrieves that waste?
That's approved storage and waste hauling.
Okay. And that's approximately once a month, you said?
Yes.
So going back to other types of waste, you have what type of waste do you have? Trash?
Trash and recycling.
Right.
That's the other two wastes.
And those, you have a scheduled pickup for refuse and recycling?
Yes.
And how frequently is that?
So every Tuesday and Friday.
And is that done by through Matrix, which operates the office park, or is that
we choose them? It's Republic Services.
Republic Services?
Yep.
Okay. I think we've addressed the questions that I've seen regarding that. Let's talk about employees. Let's discuss how many employees are presently on site at the peak.
So as you mentioned, it could be about 60. So as was previously mentioned, they will sit in E1. That's where their desks are. So they'll just go to E2, perform the testing, and go back to E1.
Okay. And so what's the breakdown in terms of scientists or technicians who do the laboratory testing and other personnel?
It's approximately 80% scientist and 20% administrative.
Okay.
QA is part of that.
What did you say?
Quality assurance is part of the administrative.
Okay. anything else you want to add about
Yeah,
the?
so quality assurance, basically, that group makes sure that we're following all the regulations. I just wanted to add that part also.
Right. All right. And the employees park across the street in the E1 parking lot, the LCE one?
Correct.
Are there any sales that occur from this facility
No,
at all?
We're not selling anything. Basically, we're service.
Right.
We test for other companies.
Okay. And do you have any business visitors or guests, and if so, how frequently?
You know, sometimes our clients will come to visit us. Maybe 3 times a month or so.
And how many typically come?
It's either 1 or 2.
Right, from the pharmaceutical companies.
Correct.
And what do? They observe the laboratory and what processes are taking
So
place?
sometimes they'll come for an audit. So they'll audit us to make sure we're following regulations, FDA regulations.
Right. Okay. Okay. In terms of deliveries, we talked about that a little bit earlier. You said in terms of the piece of equipment that will be housed in that E2 building, you want to go through what those pieces of equipment are?
So mainly it's LCMS, liquid chromatography mass spec instruments. So again, that's basically a sample is injected. The mass spec part of it will give you the molecular weight of the material that's in your sample. So it's used for identity and purity purposes.
Okay. And there was another room that was identified on that plan as well looked like it was a measuring or analysis room.
So there's a large molecule and small molecule rooms. So the large molecule room they'll use to test large molecules like proteins, antibodies. Small molecule is what you would consider, your typical pharmaceutical industry small molecule, like if you take a pill, small chemical.
Okay. All right. I don't think I have anything further for Mr. Grossman at this point. If the board has questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Our board professionals, do you have questions? I'll start with our planner.
Thank you, Mr. Grossman. Couple of questions, just follow up. These EPA, NJDEP approvals, do they do like annual review of your site? Is that like a license they provide you?
No, they don't provide a license.
Okay. So
Like OSHA come and visit us.
okay. So do they provide you with a certificate or something? Just to, when you get that, would you be willing to share a copy of that with the township just to make sure you're complying with all the performance standards as requested?
So we don't get a certificate
Okay.
From them. We get audited by the FDA.
Okay.
That'll, give us a report. But we could get inspected by the EPA for some testing that we would be doing. But they don't come and give us a certificate for.
Okay. So when and if the board approves the second building and it gets converted into a lab space, which may probably store some chemicals that
Our plan is not to store any chemicals.
Anything in there. Okay.
Right.
Okay. So they wouldn't, like I'm saying, an EPA or agency or NJDEP would not have to visit you guys to make sure that the new building is complying with everything.
Correct, because we store the chemicals in E1.
Okay. Would you be, and this is a typical request that's done by the township, because you are a permitted use, but based on the conditions that you meet all the performance standards, would you be able to provide a written description and, just simple as to what the solvents are, if they are, considered, flammable, then, do they meet the regulation standards as to how much quantity of it can you store on the site and, detail details on how it's disposed. And again, we're not asking for any kind of, typical to your business, like whatever they call that, the marketing research stuff. We're not asking, but just a general list that, these chemicals are stored on site and they are, provided any safe operating procedures to store them, to dispose them, and so on and so forth, if that can be.
I believe we had provided, there was a form that was submitted at some point that has a description of and identifies some of the chemicals that were, or I think all of the chemicals.
That'll be
that are-
stored on site?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'll find that as we're moving along. I'll find that and see if I can provide that to you again.
Right, and I even have a statement that said waste storage and disposal meet EPA and NJDEP requirements.
Okay, thank you.
I think on June 13th, I sent a letter and there was a copy of, it's hard, it's a little small.
Okay.
But
Well, as long as it's on record also, stating that you're complying with everything.
Okay. Yeah, we have no objection to doing that.
Is the current site plan show the location of this shed? I mean, the site plan that has been provided to us?
It does not.
Would you be able to provide that
Absolutely.
location to us? Now, when the waste disposal company comes, does it access it by truck? Or how do they, wherever this shed is?
So yes, they have to have a truck
Okay.
to put in the,
And is it like a small, like, is it accessible enough for that truck to
yes,
be able to
yes,
go to the rear?
We've, for many years now,
Okay.
they've been picking it up.
Okay. And is there any kind of lighting or anything around it, or it's just,
Not on the shed itself. There's
Okay.
lighting in the back. They come during the day.
they do come during
Yeah,
the
they
day?
come during the
Okay.
day.
We
We're
just
basically
would
one
need-
shift.
Okay.
Or one shift company.
Again, being, I'm sure you're aware, and just to be aware of, your neighbors, it would be nice to show on record where the shed is located.
Sure.
If, there's any lighting around it, if it is encroaching on any of the neighbors' properties. Assuming it's not, but it would be good to know and,
Right.
just relieve
It's
the
very
neighbors of
close
that.
to the building.
Okay. Okay. So if those details, I think Mr. Hambro, you're in agreement of providing that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That was one of the other questions I neglected. We didn't really talk about the hours of operations. If you would describe just very quickly the hours of operations.
So we have one shift, generally 9 to 6, but there's a little flexibility. People may come in a little early and may leave a little later, so they could leave by 7, come in at 8. That
And that's how many days a week?
5 days a week.
Monday through Friday.
Correct.
Okay, so you don't operate, at least your main staff doesn't operate on the weekends.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Razumowitz, our board engineer.
Indicated there was no lighting in the rear of the building. Is that what you said?
No, there's not on the shed itself.
Okay.
There's lighting in the rear, but just not on the shed.
Got it. So as part of the revised site plan that you're going to have to provide, you're going to have to show us the lighting in the rear of the building because you did indicate you had parking back there.
Correct.
So we need to see that lighting. Also, as far as all these chemicals, these are being used right now, right, in your building?
Correct.
And how long have you been operating there?
Probably since 2017, 18, around there.
So this is sort of just an expansion of what you're already doing. You're not
Correct.
introducing a new line of chemicals, a new testing or anything. It's just you're getting a little more room by utilizing this other building.
Yes, it's nothing new that we're doing we would be doing in E2.
Okay, thank you.
Can you provide what the dimensions are? Does it have it on that spec sheet for the
Yes.
Secure
The
shed?
dimensions are 8 feet 4 inches high, 7 feet wide, and 5 feet deep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Yes.
We'll find out if this works, or I'm just told I have a loud voice. My wife does anyhow, told me that. It sounds to me like you are here talking to us about an expansion to E2, where you're going to have more scanning equipment, is basically what you're doing for analysis. Is
So
that
we're
correct?
moving some of the equipment from E1 to E2.
That's
right?
fine. But the equipment that we're talking about that will be occupied in E2 is basically scanning equipment to continue what you've been doing for the past 6 years.
That's correct.
Okay. You're not asking for any more parking spaces. How many more employees are you asking for?
None. So
None.
right. So we're making room for equipment.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. And it also sounds like the equipment you have coming from pharmaceuticals, where there's been any chemicals of question that you've analyzed, you've had a secure place that it's being reviewed by the various federal and state authorities to make sure it's contained safely. Is that correct?
Yes.
I'm not hearing any new concerns other than you've now provided something to put into E2 when you didn't before.
That's right.
Is that my understanding now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Maybe
Patel?
beating a dead horse, but so you mentioned no chemical, biological, and again, it seems like an extension of what you've been doing all along. Are there any radioactive type chemicals that would?
No, we don't do radioactive type of work on site.
Do you test radioactive compounds?
No.
Is that it? Thank you. Anyone else?
I just want to clarify, sir, this is the secure all shed?
Yes.
So this is what the 55 gallon drums will go in?
Correct.
And I assume that this has some various government standards that says it's protective up to, bad winds and rain and all this other kind of stuff.
Yes.
I just have the concerns because we all know with the weather changing and winds and things coming, you don't want to have something that, you got to worry about it's going to tip over, and we're going to have some very dangerous stuff that could flow over from the drums into other people's yards and things of that nature. But I got to tell you, this does look like a pretty secure unit that you have here.
Yes, they're a well-known.
You never had any problems.
No.
All right. And then was there some government standard that said this is what you should use, or is this like a standard recommendation that they give you?
Yeah. So if, the description of it, the description of it tells you what standards it meets. NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, OSHA, and EPA regulations.
And it looks pretty secure too. Looks like a couple locks on there, and
it's good.
Okay.
Works
All
well
right.
for
I
us.
guess that's the only thing. And I realized you're already doing stuff, but since you're here, I'd like to have that reassurance
Yep,
for
no
everybody.
problem.
All right. Thank you.
Question about this process and analytical work which you are going to carry on in this area. Any hazardous fumes or flow of the material will be there on the floor or on the tables or anything which employees has to be concerned about?
No, we have fume hoods. So if people need to open, they work in the fume hoods.
So how it is disposed, or how it is going in the air, or it has a separate HVAC, or how it goes?
It's designed with a filter and meeting, the EPA requirements.
EPA requirements. Any suction pumps specifically which don't spread in the environment or the air of the room?
No, I think it's really just fans. The fans that pull the air in and up through the system.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have a quick question. Is this secondarily contained, the secure all, in the event of a spill?
So there's basically the metal shed around it, and then the 55-gallon drum. So the 55-gallon drum is the first containment, and then you have the shed itself.
So if a drum releases, it all stays in the shed?
Right.
Thank you.
Maybe you want to provide you have
Yeah, I
a
can
spec sheet
provide
that,
kind of a description of it. Yep. The door's locked.
yeah, can we present that as A5, I guess it would be? Do you have any other copies?
Yes, I can give you 4 copies. You want to take this one? This.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's fine. Yeah, that's kind of the second page. There are a few different pages. I kind of just gave them the first page. The top part is the same, though. The top part is the same. That has the description.
That's good. We'll share them. Thank you. We can continue.
So that Exhibit A5 was the spec sheet that you obtained from the company that's provided by the company Securall.
Yes, it's on their website.
And that's a description of compliance and what standards it satisfies.
Correct.
Okay. I don't have any further questions or any testimony
Thank
from Mr. Grossman. I
Thank
do
you.
have one more witness.
Yes, please
Thank
continue.
you.
Thank you.
Mr. Frank Antisel.
Mike, swear you in. Swear to tell us you're the whole truth.
Yes, I do.
State your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. It's Frank Antisel, Antisell.
Thank you. Mr. Antisel, if you could provide the board with your educational background and professional certifications, licenses.
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Widener University. I have a master's degree from Stevens Institute of Technology. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the states of New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. I'm a licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, and I've been testifying before boards like this for the last 30 years.
Have you appeared before the any of the Monroe boards before?
Yes, I've appeared before both Monroe boards.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's acceptable. Thank you very much.
So he's being presented here as a planner this evening.
Okay.
So the reason you were retained was with respect to variances that were being sought, particularly in this case with respect to signage. If you could describe to the board what it is that presently exists and the need for the variances.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. There are 2 existing signs on the property right now for these 2 buildings. The first sign is located right here along the driveway in front of E1. The sign that's in front of E1 is 48 inches by 63 inches. So it's roughly 21 square feet. It has a height of 5 foot 3 inches. And it's an identification sign. We have a detail of it up here. It also has a directional sign for the visitors. It tells visitors parking is over to the left. The second sign that is a sign right over here, and that's for building E2. And that's the size of that sign is 24 inches by 12 inches. So it's a total of 2 square feet, and it has a height of 36 inches or 3 feet. These small signs are similar to other signs that are in the complex. They're needed because they're identification signs. This way it directs people where to go in the complex and where to park in the complex. And this building's a little bit different. These two buildings are a little bit different than a lot of the other buildings. We don't have any facade signs on our building. So the only signage that we have are these two small ground signs. They're existing. They've been there for a while. Unfortunately, your OP zone doesn't allow signs. So that's why a variance is required for them. They've been there for a while, but we don't see anything in any of the approvals that say they were ever approved. So hence we're here to ask for approval for these signs.
Yeah, so you have some pictures you can show, you want to use as an exhibit?
If you want to hand them out, you can. They're located on the plan here.
Okay.
I don't know if you, if
these are
the board needs
blow-up.
to see pictures of it, but we can give you blow-up pictures of both signs.
Well, I guess it would be, where are we at? A6?
A6.
A6.
How many copies does do you have?
I have, 3 color and then another, we can give you another 4 or 5.
That's right.
Then we have A7. What would be A7?
Now, just so the board's aware, we show that on A7 is the sign for E2. Just so the board's aware, the dimension that's shown on here is incorrect. It shows a width and it shows a depth, which is the thickness of the sign. So it's 24 inches wide, but it's 12 inches high. So,
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Excuse me. So instead of the 36 inches, it should be 12. Is that correct?
it's yes, it should be 12, and the height from the ground to the top of the sign is 36 inches.
So what was the change? 12 is the width?
It's 24 wide,
Right.
12 inches high.
Just at 36.
Microphones.
36 in distance from the ground to the top of the sign.
Both, please, microphones.
Oh.
You need to,
So from the ground to the top of the sign is 36 inches.
Gotcha.
The sign itself is 24 wide by 12 high. So it's located 2 feet off of the ground to the bottom, 3 feet to the top.
So it's the base.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yep. So when we put the dimension on there, it was put on there for the whole, as if it was a solid sign, and it's not completely solid.
Okay, so you've described the need for the sign, or what you feel is a perceived need for the sign from a planning perspective. In terms of standards for variances, how do we comply with satisfying that requirement?
Sure. I mean, we believe that these signs can be approved by the C2 standards for bulk variances. And when you look at these signs, signs are in character and similar to the signs for the other buildings in the complex. When you look at special reasons, special reason A promotes the general welfare. Special reason G promotes sufficient space in particular area. And also special reason I, which is the promotion of an enhanced visual environment. Signs are important to direct the public or the visitors to the site to the parking areas and also to the buildings and also delivery trucks. As to negative criteria, we don't believe there's any negative criteria to these signs. The nice thing is the signs are located where the building blocks them from the residents behind the building. So the signs aren't visible to any of the residents or any of the surrounding areas. So we believe that the signs can be approved without any substantial detriment to the township's master plan.
And in terms of the location of these signs, they are within the corporate complex, which is a private area.
Yes.
Which is not generally accessed by the public.
Correct.
Okay.
But if you were to miss the building, you'd have to go loop around one of the other buildings and come back. So it would be, it's nice to know where you're going and having the directional sign there.
Thank you. I have no further questions for Mr. Antisel. And that would be the end of our presentation.
End of the testimony? And
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I'd like to hear from our board professionals, our planner first. Thank you.
Mr. Antisel, to clarify a few things. So these signs have existed, since 2017, I'm assuming, because when the building did come about. I'm assuming the name changed, but the signs of the structure itself has always existed. Is that correct?
That's the best of my knowledge. Yes, they've always been there. And when you go back on Google, you can see them.
And is it in your professional opinion that these are more directional signs, and they fit that criteria in our ordinance?
They would fit the directional signs because they are directing people to where the buildings are and also to where the parking is.
Okay. Are they illuminated in any way?
No, they are not.
Neither one of them. And there is no changes proposed to the E2 sign. It's just reading E2. It will remain reading E2.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Sorry, I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Razumowitz.
Thanks. I have nothing for the planner.
Okay. We're good.
That's our presentation. I could sum up, or if you want, I guess you want to open to the public.
Well, let me just ask the board if
I'm sorry.
anybody has
I
any
apologize.
questions. Any additional questions, comments? None? Okay. Okay. I'd like to open up the public comment period.
We're going to swear you in, as we do with every witness. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Would you tell us your full name?
Michael McDonald,
Address, please.
710A Yarborough Way. All right, my first question is regarding the storage shed of the contained biohazardous the materials. What happens, I'd like to know, if they're inside the actual container, if there's a leak in the 55-gallon drum, is there some type of an indicator before that door is actually opened up and the containment spills onto the ground? My second question, and nobody's addressed that, and a lot of the folks I know they want to know, is how much of the wooded area around building E2 is planned on being removed?
I can answer the second part. Nothing is intended to be removed in terms of any trees from behind the building. There's no plan to remove any trees. You can answer, if you could, Steve, his question about containment, I guess.
The drums have to meet certain standards themselves. So they're not, leaked or punctured.
Okay. But what if they were, under some circumstances? How frequently is that secure shed visited or observed? Is it on a daily basis? Is it?
It's pretty much on a
several
daily
times a day?
basis. It's on a daily basis. And then the shed is, like, again, a secondary containment part of that.
Okay. So with the number, like you said, several times a day, somebody would observe if there was a leak.
Correct.
In the drum, any of these drums.
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Yes.
Let me just one quick. I'm sorry. Let me just quickly follow up. To your knowledge, has there ever, in the time that Primera has been operating there, has there ever been a leak?
We've never had an issue. No leaks. No issue with the shed.
Thank you.
You could talk into a microphone, please.
Full name and spell the last name, please.
Joan, Nischak.
Your address?
678B Yarborough Way, South. One question. It seems to be obvious that because you stated you were going to be restriping the back parking lot behind E1, that will be repaved, I assume. That it's a mine field. So I assume that's going to be repaved and striped. And I'm wondering if you have any plans to increase the impervious surface?
You can.
We don't have any plans to increase the impervious surface. Restriping is what
I think the board's engineer requested, I believe. Didn't you request that we restripe in the rear? Maybe.
Madam Chair, there was no proposed increase in impervious based on your plans. I believe your architect mentioned restriping the rear of the building, and I clarified that you are agreeing to restripe the parking in the rear of the building, but there's no new pavement that you're providing or impervious coverage.
Correct.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
And along with that work, you mentioned E2, but is there any plans for any cleaning up after behind that parking lot on E1? Or are you leaving trees as is?
we have no plans to change any trees forward.
And I know you mentioned lighting on E2. Is there any change in the lighting in the back of E1?
No.
Well, there was a request to have a light to the rear of the E1 building, if I'm not mistaken.
There are lights.
There are existing lights?
There are existing lights in the rear of the building.
Okay.
Madam Chair, just for the record, my request was that you indicated there was existing lighting, and I asked that that be shown on the plan, that you demonstrate that those parking spaces are lit.
Very good.
But no new lighting is proposed behind the E1 building.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to show where this shed is going to be on the?
You want to show them on the plan?
Or is this the current shed? Yes, that's.
Can you speak into a microphone?
Can you just mark it with an X?
It's next to the building.
Could you grab the microphone and speak?
Make sure the light is on.
Light is on. Hello? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I put an X here, which is right next to the building.
And that's to the rear, right next to the building itself.
Correct.
Is that all? Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I know, the screen's in my way.
We're going to swear you in. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do.
Say your full name and spell your last name, please.
My name is Adrian Rogove, Rogove. My mother, Ruth Cohen, lives at 684B Yarborough Way.
Is the microphone on? The light?
The light is on. Can you hear me?
You got to bring it close, very close.
Close,
Yeah.
close.
There you
Okay.
go.
I'll try my best. I don't speak too loudly. So, some of my questions have been answered tonight, so I thank you. I also thank you for allowing me to address the board and the applicant. I was concerned because I was trying to, once I received notice of the application, I was trying to find out what Primera actually does. And I don't know if it's my computer, but their website has been broken for at least 7 days. So it's impossible to really understand the nature of the business. Although.
So as far as I hear, we've redesigned the website, so that'll be coming out.
Okay,
shortly.
That's good. So my concern is not with the signage or the landscaping, but the chemicals that are either processed, handled, analyzed in the lab. My first question really is relates to the ordinance, which allows research labs to be included in the office professional zone. There isn't any information in the materials that I read about whether this is a research lab or how that is defined under applicable standards. I did not see a definition in the municipal ordinance. So I guess that would be one of my questions. I believe Mr. Grossman said that this was an analytical testing lab, which I'm not sure what the definition of that is and whether or not that is a research lab or not. So my first concern is whether or not this is even a permitted use under the ordinance. My second concern is with the chemicals that are being handled, processed, tested, handled, transported, disposed of. Mr. Grossman indicated in his testimony that the company deals with solvents, organic material, and acids. But the table that was submitted to this board, and excuse me for 1 second. Has a category called HPLC liquid waste. And these include liquids such as acetonitrile, methanol, water, alcohol, acids, etc. And then there are waste codes referred to. These are waste codes D001, D002, and F003. So first, what does the such as mean? What are included in these chemicals? We're most concerned about the health and safety aspect of this and any impact to the environment. There have been, I don't have testimony today to tell you that these diseases are caused by what's been going on over the fence with Primera, but on our little street, there have been and are many cases of cancer. We do smell fumes at night and in the early morning. I don't know if this is coming from Primera or somewhere else. I'd like to know why that is the case. The planner in her report states that the applicant must demonstrate compliance with all applicable performance standards. And I'm not sure that that has been done. And I'm assuming, this is not my business, but that the performance standards are those that are designated by the DEP, the EPA, FDA, for the handling of these wastes. HPLC chemicals are hazardous. The solvents used in analysis is often flammable, creating a fire hazard. So the storage and removal regulations require specific waste containers, etc., which Mr. Grossman addressed with respect to the 55-gallon drums, but I don't know if that's applicable to all the materials. The acetonitrile is a toxic, colorless liquid with an ether-like odor and a sweet burnt taste. It is extremely dangerous and can cause severe health effects. And the methanol is a chemical that is likewise extremely poisonous. The D001 waste codes are waste identified by the EPA as ignitable hazardous waste and must be managed as hazardous waste on site according to RCRA generator status. I don't know that that's been addressed by the applicant. D003 code wastes are reactive wastes that are unstable under normal conditions. They can cause explosions, toxic fumes, gases, or vapors when heated, compressed, or mixed with water. The materials don't address what's being done with those particular wastes. And the F003 wastes are toxic hazardous solvents, but the application does not define what they are. So what I would like to know, or what I would like to have addressed, is which performance standards relate to these specific chemicals that are being handled on site, and what information is there relating to the health, safety, and health consequences of these chemicals, and how do we know that the EPA standards are being adhered to? And I know that Mr. Grossman referred to SOPs and that the regs are being complied with, and I accept that, but I would assume that there should be certifications to that effect. These are not just things like salt and pepper. These have to be handled in a very specific way, but what is that way, and how do we know it's being handled properly? Same comment with respect to storage, same comment with respect to transport from the building to the storage shed. What's the means of transport? I didn't understand until tonight that the storage shed was an exterior standalone building. Who has access to the shed? How do we know the measures that are taken to contain spills and exposure of these chemicals to air, ground, and the ground water? We had a slurry of toxic materials that came onto the Rossmore property some years ago. So it does happen. These are not frivolous concerns. And how are the health consequences for the neighbors in Rossmore being addressed and safeguarded? And those are my questions and my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to respond?
There was a lot there.
There's a lot there.
There was a lot there. There was some of them that were either of a legal question in terms of permitted uses, but I think what we can try to address is, do we comply with the performance standards? I say with no question that we comply with the town's performance standards as set forth in section 108 5.21, and those are at D. But if you could, Steve, address some of the questions that I heard were, how are the materials, how are these chemicals or waste chemicals, if you want to call it, once they're used, taken from the building into the secure-all shed? How far of a distance are we talking?
Right. So it's a short distance from the.
Well, what's a short distance?
I would say maybe 25 feet or so, 20 feet or so.
Okay.
So there are containers where you put the waste in, bring it to the shed. It's a safety container.
Okay. And that's carried by hand by the technicians or scientists.
Right.
And then what happens to it? It's
So then it is poured into the drum.
Inside the secure-all.
Correct.
And the drums, how many drums are there inside the secure-all?
About 4.
Okay. 55 gallons.
Correct.
So the containers that are carried from the laboratory to the secure-all, how big are those? How much liquid or?
There may be about 4 liters, I would say.
Okay. So like a gallon potentially?
Yeah.
All right.
About a gallon.
All right.
And we're not a manufacturer, so we don't use huge amounts of solvents that say manufacturer might. We're testing laboratory.
Right. So how many per day on an average? How much in terms of liquid waste is utilized in the laboratory and then taken to the secure-all approximately?
I would say approximately taken to the secure-all, maybe about 10 liters or so.
Okay. And there was some questions about the different categories of chemicals, the DOO3s, and I think those were on your list. So if you could be a little bit more specific and describe what those are.
So we have specific storage cabinets for those. As I mentioned, flammable, there's a special cabinet for flammable materials. We have fume hoods. So anything, organic, we go into the fume hood, and in fume hood, there are cabinets there.
Okay.
So they basically meet the requirements
of the DEP, EPA,
NJDEP, OSHA. OSHA is really the federal.
Right, because you're concerned about the safety of your own employees, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And they wear specialized equipment when they're in the lab?
Correct.
All right. And those other ones, the flammable ones, are taken and disposed of by, I don't remember the name of the companies that you mentioned.
Waste Management.
Okay. And that's how frequently?
So that is there about every 2 months or so.
All right. And what kind of quantity of flammable materials is?
So again, there are 55-gallon drums.
And those are maintained in secure?
Correct.
Okay. Can you address some of the other? I think there were mention of several different. My eyes aren't that good, but you got a DOO1, you have a DOO2,
right?
FOO.
Yeah, so they're also picked up, since Waste Management, they have their own procedures that they have to follow to ensure that they're properly disposed of.
And those are
disposed of.
And those carriers, those waste disposal entities are licensed by the state of New Jersey and the DEP?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you speak to the permitted use? What this is, a laboratory, and what type of laboratory it is, and is this a permitted use?
Yeah, as far as our reading and opinion as to the type of use, it's been operating there for 4 or 5 years already, 6 years, 6 years. And it is a permitted use under the ordinance. That's our opinion, and that's what we submitted this under.
I'll defer to the planner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the OP zone permits research labs, and the way our ordinance doesn't explicitly design, but in land use, we use the Moskowitz land use book as a reference point. It is a widely known in land use, a book material when you can't find the ordinance definition in your own zoning ordinance. Research lab is defined as a workplace where research, scientific testing, and testing of other kinds that is conducted. I believe this property, as Mr. Hambro said, in 2017, this use was permitted as a permitted use. What they are doing right now is coming in with an E2 where they are just expanding the operation, and it appears to be a permitted use that has been determined by the zoning officer, by your board planner. In terms of performance standards, the way this use has been permitted in Township of Monroe is the applicant has to provide details on performance standards. That has to be, as you must have heard, me asking them as to if you're regulated by EPA, are you regulated by OSHA and NJDEP. Our ordinance and performance standard also says the applicant has to provide proof that all this has been conducted, and the applicant has agreed to show in whichever way that they are, regularly tested. And I know there's no certificate, but there is an overseeing state regulation that reviews that. In terms of the applicant has agreed to provide us details on a signed document by the applicant telling us, what chemicals are stored in the quantity, how they are disposed. And I believe the applicant just testified even removal of waste is done by a licensed facility in a regulated environment. So, these items are kept on record. They are regulated by federal. I don't believe township can review. I certainly don't know half these chemicals, but that's how performance standards are regulated in Township of Monroe.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yep. Anyone else from the public? Yes.
Swear to tell us your full name, spell your last name, please.
Joyce Clowley, Cloughly. Your address is 684A Yarborough Way. Is this working? Okay, I was interested in this shed seems to be quite small, not large at all. Is it bolted to anything in case there would be a hurricane again?
There is.
Sounds like a mobile park kind of situation where whoop, something could tip over.
Well, I think based on the weight and the design, it's designed to withstand.
Well, I guess the 55-gallon drums are used to help hold it down.
Right.
Maybe something else should be too. And maybe a containment wall built, like when you see petroleum facilities, if there were a spill, there would be a containment with an impervious liner. Or better yet, put it in E2 as a tertiary layer of protection. Why not? It's kind of small.
So what I can say is, again, that it meets OSHA requirements.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically used as further requirements.
Okay. For better peace of mind for your neighbors, as a tip of the hat to us who live downwind from this facility, how about moving the shed at least into E2? Find a little space for it. Because you're pouring these chemicals, you're carrying them in a cart, and you're pouring them in the shed. So how about just having everything indoors in E2?
So I think it's actually, since the bulk of the testing is done in E1, moving it over to E2 takes it further away from, the material. So I would almost consider that as being less of a good situation.
I got a great idea. Put it in E1. There you go. Solved.
So there can be other issues storing it internally. But again, this shed is designed for the outside, specifically for the outside.
And does it aid in the pickup of the waste, the drums?
Yes.
Do they actually take the drums themselves, the disposal companies?
They do not take the drums. I don't know specifically, their procedures.
They do not take the drums, so they pump it out.
So again, I don't know their procedure for what they do.
Maybe we should find out.
So that's an easy question. That can be
Right. So they are licensed. They are licensed by DEP.
Mm-hmm. Stuff happens, though. Human error, oopsie daisies. That's why it would be nice to have it in another building. Because if it's in your building where you're working, you're going to be extra careful. But if it's over next to, Rossmore, out of sight, out of mind. So at least it would be a goodwill gesture to think about a further containment of this hazardous material, in my opinion. Oh, one more thing. I often hear the sound of steam or air being discharged, and it seems to be coming from the brown building, and it goes on for many, many minutes. Is that a Primera discharge, and what is being discharged?
I'm not aware of anything coming from the Brown building. You mean E2?
And from the direction of the Brown building. Does anyone know? Because I've heard this, like discharge of air and steam, or steam, whatever it is. But I'd like to know what is being discharged and why. And if you want me to make a recording, using my iPhone, it goes on for many minutes. So has anyone, maybe someone else can pinpoint more than I, because I'm not really close to it, but.
Excuse me.
Wait.
If you're going
So I'm
one
done.
at a time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Yes.
I'd
Thank
love
you.
that to be answered.
Thank you.
And I will check on the
Yeah.
procedure there.
Okay. So as far as we are concerned, we comply with all performance standards. We comply with all DEP standards. We comply with all OSHA standards. The disposal companies that are utilized are licensed by the state of New Jersey and by the EPA when it's the appropriate, whatever the regulatory authority is. We probably go beyond what is required. The actual amount of chemicals and hazardous, if you want to call them that, materials or chemicals, is relatively small. There's no manufacturing of these materials, and they are stored appropriately. You've seen the Secure-All. You've seen photographs of it. You've seen the spec sheets. It complies with all of the applicable standards, or more so. So I do not think there's any concern that should be raised regarding that. I mean, all we can do is comply with what the standards are. So and we do that.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Yes, please come forward.
Where to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but state your full name. So you'll miss.
My name is Diane England. And I live at 401A Oxford Lane, a room in Oxford. It has been brought up today about the trees. And I want to speak a bit more about the trees because you've indicated that you have no intention of removing the trees. But I was not one of the people who got it. However, a lot of my neighbors were. And I know people sitting here tonight were. And a lot of us almost have PTSD from being flooded because I was in New Hampshire before I moved here across. So my concern is really that there be a commitment, not just from them, but basically from the board, planning board, that if people come to you asking that trees be removed at the matrix development, which of course abuts Rossmore at a couple of places where they flooded the worst, that you would really take this seriously and not allow trees to be removed unless they are dying or they are dead. Because the trees right now, this time of year, it looks quite lovely. But if they are removed, I do believe that they are involved in flood mitigation. They cover multiple flood. I believe that they offer sound buffering from the turnpike. And if you want to look at buildings that are in that business complex, they are nothing like the architecture of Rossmore, which was designed to have a New England look and feel. And in your latest plan, it says that when there is commercial property that is up against a residential area, it should adhere to the architecture of the community. Now, I understand this was all done a long time ago, but I would just ask you to be cognizant of that. And I think we need those trees, even though they have more space in their rear yard than they have to. And that's the problem. They have more space than they have to. So someone could come along and say, let's remove the trees because we want to do this instead. So that I just want to lay it out there. And I was glad to hear someone mention tonight that there is a new rule, which I'm sure you're aware of, that came into effect just this month, where New Jersey is going to ask us to adhere to much stricter standards because of the flooding and the potential for more flooding. And I know Rossmore has not been hit as badly as we're predicted to be hit in the future. So this is a very important issue of flood mitigation, and some of our problems have come from the matrix development. So I hope we can get this resolved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to reiterate, as far as I know, during the period of time that Primera has been there, they have not removed trees. It's possible that there may have been some that were dead that they were taken, but they have not removed any trees or any brush. It's pretty dense in the rear behind us. The building is probably, 130, 100 and more feet from the nearest property line, at least, and it is pretty densely wooded. There is, again, no plan to remove any trees or brush, no plan to increase any impervious coverage, any impervious surfaces. I would also submit that prior to this becoming a condominium, this was an industrial complex that was owned by Rhodia, Rome Planck, which were big industrial companies. And there were many activities that were much more potentially health impacting than what's taking place at the present time. So there's been, in my view, an improvement over time to this area from an industrial facility owned by Rhodia, Rome Planck, General Foods. So that was in the 90s that occurred, that changeover occurred, I think. And it's been in the Matrix, I think, developed this beginning in somewhere in the early 2000s. They bought the existing buildings and they've been selling them as condominiums. So I think over time it's been an improvement. And we certainly will comply with all the performance standards and with all the zoning ordinances, and we will be good neighbors.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Please come up.
My name is Sheila Pugh.
Swear to tell the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, full name, spell your last name.
Sheila McHugh, MC, capital C-U-E. My address is 385 B Sudbury Lane in Monroe. And I really appreciate getting the notification about the changes planned for the building at E2. I looked at the building, I looked at the area around it, and for most of what I can see, it's a big improvement. I would rather have a lab there than a warehouse that's likely to draw vermin. So it's probably going to be a good thing as long as you maintain the safety. What I'm here for is to ask for a good neighbor policy from all nations. And I realize that may not be you folks particularly, but the entire complex. The fact that it's a condo association makes it a little complicated. But I'm part of a condo association at my address. But I feel that these two condo associations need to have a good neighbor policy. I'm sure the planning board is aware that Ross Marsh commissioned an engineering study, and the pond that is adjoining the building at E2, it's a stone throw away from E2. That pond is going to overflow. We have 8 inches of rain again. And we had it 2 years ago, and we've had very heavy rains up and down this coast. I'm pleading with the board and I'm pleading with the people from Matrix to take some action and get a shovel in the ground and do something about this. Because a lot of us lost our homes and had to rebuild them 2 years ago. And every time it rains, the anxiety level goes through the roof. There's no reason why that pond cannot be addressed. We have a city engineer, we have an assemblyman who is there visiting with the people the day they were, during the days that right after the flood. You know what the trauma was throughout the war. Many of the addresses that you notified about this variance request were heavily impacted by that flood. So when you repave your parking lot, please repave it with material that will allow the water to go through. Pervious material, not impervious material. Perhaps you can arrange to have some of that parking removed. There's a vast area of parking back by that pond that never gets used. It should be torn up so that the water can be absorbed. We need to make a plan and we need to make it now. I'm pleading with all of you to do that. We should look with that. Helping the plan.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, I'd like to close the public portion. Make a motion to close.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I'd like to open up a discussion, maybe starting with our board engineer and planner about this application. To see where we are with everything and open up comments from the board.
Madam Chair, Seth, did you go to the Environmental Commission before coming here yet?
We did not. We
Okay.
did not submit.
Madam Chair, there's many items that were brought before us tonight that we're hearing for the first time and seeing for the first time. For instance, the handicap parking stall was removed. That was removed tonight. Plan shows something different. We have new handicap stalls that are going to be provided. They agreed to that. I don't see them. I don't know where they're at. The secure all shed location, I don't know where it's at. It's not on the plan. It's not shown. We learned about it tonight. Dumpsters, they've agreed to provide dumpsters. Again, it's not on the plan. Don't know if that's going to trigger more variances or not. Don't know what the buffering is around it, how that's going to impact the neighbors. We need to see it. Loading spaces, I think they indicated there was 2 in the rear of the building. Again, I don't see it on the plans. Lighting in the rear, we talked about. I don't know where it is. I don't know if it impacts the neighbors. They've agreed, if they talked about sidewalks they were going to provide. Again, not on the plan. Tree removal. They're saying they're not removing trees. Honestly, I don't know how you're not going to remove a couple trees at least at your entrance to this E2 building, on the side of the building where you're going to put HVAC equipment. I'm not sure because, again, it's not on the plan. So I can't tell based on your plans. You don't show those tree locations. Again, there's just a lot that still needs to be provided. At this point, I couldn't recommend that the board take action on it only because there's not enough information before you to make a determination. You know, some of these other questions that were raised with regarding some of the chemicals and the concerns raised, I think there's more clarification that needs to be provided by the applicant. And based on all this information, right now they're looking for a minor site plan approval that may trigger it to become a major site plan approval. Again, which you know, not that big of a deal. However, it does require more engineering and additional plans. I heard tonight they're going to pave, not pave. I'm not sure if you're repaving parking lots or not at this point. So again, I need quite a bunch more information here. You know, from my end, from engineering, and I believe for the board to make a determination.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Afti?
I have nothing further, but I would agree with our board engineer regarding the information that needs to be supplied.
Yes, Mr. Rothman?
You know, Mark, here I was all set to make a motion to approve, and you got me. You have an application that was just going to be a minor change, basically taking equipment you already have and adding more of it and putting it in another building. I saw that as a simplistic thing. But what I'm hearing from the engineer is a lot more things to be done. I do agree with our planner that whenever the DPA, OSHA, anyone sends you any kind of reports, it immediately should be copied to our planner so we understand exactly what's going on. However, hearing my engineer, I have to say I move to postpone till next month so he gets a full report that he can share with this board. That's what we need to do. We can't approve where it's what's going to happen, we don't know. So my motion is to postpone. That's it.
The expiration date
Madam,
the application is 8/26/2023. So our next meeting is August the 24th. So,
They've got 2 days.
a month. They get a month.
Yes.
If your motion is successful, we carry for the next one.
Yep.
And it'll be up to the applicant and the applicant's attorney to provide additional documentation as discussed.
Thank you. Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I also heard what our engineer had to say, and you know, we have these things, and what my fellow planning board member also said looked like a simple thing, but we're taking a chemical testing facility and expanding it. We have a lot of citizens that are very concerned about the overall impact. We were not here. I was not here 6-7 years ago when it was approved, and I'm not suggesting that there's anything wrong with, what you're doing, or I'm not suggesting that perhaps an expansion is going to cause any graver harm, but we as planning board members are not, we're not chemists. We're not, involved in that type of stuff. So when we have an issue, for example, where somebody wants to build something and there's an issue regarding traffic and things of that nature, I hear from a traffic expert. I don't understand a lot of this chemical stuff. I'd like to hear maybe what a chemical expert might say. What are these products? Adrian ran off a list of about 15, 20 different things, many of which are serious. How are they properly disposed of? What is the standard for the EPA, for the DEP? What does the state want? And how do we know that it's being complied? You can't just tell me that you use standard operating procedure when we don't know what the standard operating procedure is and whether or not your standard operating procedure complies with state regulations and other things. It may very well do that. And if it does that, you're certainly entitled to what you're entitled to. But we as a board cannot make an intelligent decision tonight based on what we have before us. And these citizens, the points that were brought up by many of the citizens were very well warranted. They've been through a lot and they deserve to not have to worry about being put through something else. So I will second your motion, Mr. Rothman. Thank you.
Is that a motion to carry?
We'll keep it carried until the next regular meeting, until August 24th, 2023.
Okay. Mr. Rothman?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Ms. Brodsky? Yes. Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Councilman Van Zora?
Yes.
Mayor's representative, Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Vice Chair, Ms. Polidoro? Yes.
If I could, if I could discuss with my client in terms of the time that's maybe needed to address these, if we can do it, because it is 30 days, right? Or less than 30 days, actually. And you're going to need this.
Madam Chair, it's about 30 days. You would need to have documentation in 2 weeks prior to the meeting. So that gives you only about 2 weeks.
Right. All right. You're promising it. Okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, I would add that, Steve, it's certainly your decision, but, you might want to consider coming in for a technical review meeting with the board professionals prior to. We meet the 11th, August 11th is that meeting. But that's up to you to consider. You can, contact planning and zoning and schedule that with Laura if you're looking to do that prior to the board hearing.
Okay.
John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your comments and your time this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have some additional business if you're.
Yes.
So let me so other than the engineering issues and the chemical issues, I don't think we need to bring back our plan with regard to the sign. I don't see any need to do that. But in terms of the next meeting, it's really more of a plan and compliance with the standards.
I would submit your stuff and wait for the response from the professionals. Submit everything and wait for your response from the professionals and then determine at that point.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In our packets, we have memorialization of a minor subdivision approval, PB 1254-22, minor subdivision Joyce R. Williams with bulk variances. Everyone had a chance to review this in your packet. If everything looks okay.
Yes. Motion to approve.
Motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay, the next item up is the public portion. Does anyone wish to say? Excuse me. We have one order of business left. There's public portion. Does anyone have anything to bring to the public out? Discussion, not the plan. Anything else other than the plan? Nothing? Okay.
Public portion.
Not in regard to this.
Not in regard to the application, however.
Because we want to maintain the record.
That's all right.
Okay. All right. So then if there's no public portion, I'd entertain a motion to close.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. There's no discussion items or correspondence. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Yes, motion.
Yeah.
Second?
Good job.
All